In this video, we'll have a look at how to create a new data table online in Backendless, as well as how to add data to that table. So we're going to do this in coding, but if you want to, and you go into and log into your account again, and I'm at the Context 2019 video, the one that we stopped working with on the previous video, and you go to the left hand side into your data part, you will see that you currently have no tables at all. But you can add a new table by just clicking on the plus sign, and then you need to give your table a name. So I'm just going to call this one contact. Now if I say create, it will then create that table for me, and it's going to ask me now, do I want to configure this table? So we're going to say yes there. And for example, we can have a name for the contact and have it as a type of string. And then after creating the first column, you can just go and create new columns by clicking on new. So I can have, let's say, an email address for this contact. We can have a telephone number for this contact. And so we can keep on creating columns for this specific table. So this is one way of doing it, is to go into the online environment and using this plus sign and creating all the tables you need. Just remember, in the free plan, you're only allowed to use 5 tables here. So your users table is not one of the 5, which means that in total you can have these 5 tables plus your user table. Right, so in this case, we created this contact now. So I'm going to delete it again, this table, but we're going to create this in Java or in the Android application with using Java coding. So for every table that you have in Backendless, you should have a corresponding class in Android so that the two can link up together. So it's better if you can create the class in Android and let it sync here, and it will create the table automatically for you. So let's go back to Android Studio where we left off. And we're going to create a new class there. So I'm going to create a new Java class. Let's call the class contact and say OK. Now looking at this contact class then, it's just a normal Java class. So we're going to have private fields here. And I'm going to say private string name for the contact. We'll have a private string email for the contact. We'll have a private string telephone number for the contact. And we'll have a private string user email address. Now the idea behind this user email is that for every user that logs in, we can keep track of which of the contacts belong to that specific user. Right, so we have a name, an email column, a telephone number column, and a user email. So let's say these are the columns that we want to have online. But now we also want to have a few other columns. And if you go online again, and let's just create, I'm just going to create a contact quickly again there and say create, and let's give it one column name there. And if I go into data browse, you will see for this table that you created, you will have different columns. For example, an object ID that's a string. You will have created and you'll have updated. So I'm going to use these also. So the created and updated, as well as your object ID, I want to add as part of that class if you want to be able to get them. So I'm going to do the following. I'm going to add them here as well. So I'm going to say private string object ID, and your spelling must be exactly the same. So look at the spelling of object ID there, and look at the spelling of created as well as updated. Right, so we've got the object ID there. Then if you want to use the dates, we're going to use the java.util.date. So it's java.util.date, and we're going to use created and a private date updated. So remember that these are not necessary to include in your class. They will automatically be created. But if you want to be able to get them or set them, you must add them also in your class here. If you don't care about when this object was created or updated, and you don't care about the object ID, then there will be no problems at all. You can just leave it out of your class. Then after we're done with this, we're just going to right click and we're going to say generate getter and setter, and you need to create getters and setters for all of those. Right, so this is basically how we create a table online in Backendless. So as soon as we start saving an object of this class now to Backendless, that table will automatically be created for us. So this is all we need to set up a new table in Backendless. So we'll have columns for name, email, telephone number, user email, object ID created and updated, and maybe some other columns that will be added automatically. So now let's create a new activity where we can demonstrate how we create a new contact to the database. So I'm going to go in and say new activity, and we're going to use the empty activity. And let's call this activity create contact. Say finish. Right now, so this new activity has been created and synced successfully. Let's go back to the website for backendless training, and that's bit.ly backendless 2019. And I want you to go to this progress bar to be used in the application. If you go there again, you remember we used that in the first videos. There's the layout again with the coding that we need in order to show that progress bar. So I'm going to take the layout as it is, copy everything there, and I'm going to go into Android Studio, and for this create new contact, I'm going to paste that coding. So just go into the text, I'm going to remove literally everything there, and then we have this layout. You can just remove that one line there. Right, so that's all we need for the layout. If we go to create contact, we can also then go into just the bottom part of this document, go and create or copy those, go back to Android Studio, let's add them at the top, Alt-Enter for the view, Alt-Enter for the text view. Let's go back to that document. I'm going to take these 3 lines also just to set it up quickly. Paste them there. Go back again. Take this whole method. Copy it. Go back to Android Studio. And let's paste that method. Now also just a few Alt-Enters here and import the classes needed. Let me just undo that one. So it's going to be Alt-Enter import class for the build, and then for these animators. Right, and then you should not have any errors. Okay, so while we're doing this, I'm going to create another activity. We're going to say new activity again, and we use an empty activity, and let's call this one contact list. So this will be the contact list activity, which we'll do in the next video, but let's just set up the layout for this one so long, so that we don't have to copy and paste again in the other video. So for this contact list then, the same thing again. I'm going to take this whole layout that we just copied and pasted into create contact. I'm going to go to contact list, and I'm going to replace this coding there. So that is 100% fine. And then in create contact, we have this. I'm going to copy it from there, go into contact list, paste it there, go back to create contact, get those 3 lines, go to contact list, paste it, go back to create contact again, take this bottom method, copy it, and paste it as part of contact list. Right, so then this one is set up also that when we come back for the next video, this part has already been done and we can just work with the layout. Right, so these 2 are fine, except for if we go to contact list XML, let's change that main activity context to contact list, and let's change this create contact context there, that's the main activity. Let's make it create contact. Right, so now we're ready to build the layout for the create contact. So I'm going to close down contact list, and let's build the layout for creating a new contact. So the first thing I'm going to do is to go and set the background here as the primary light. Let's go to design, and we have the primary light background. So what I want to do now is to ask the user to enter a new contact. And for the contact, you will remember now that we need a name, an email, and a telephone number. The user email we'll have automatically, and I'll show you how we're going to do that one. But the name, the email, and the telephone number is needed to create a new contact online. Name, email, telephone number. So let's go and get a plain text for the name. I'm going to drag it into the form. Then for the email, let's just drag in an email edit text there, and then we need a telephone number, so let's drag in the phone one. Now if we open up this a bit more, let's just try and zoom in. Right, so on these 3 then, let's set the layout margin on the end as 30, on the start as 30 as well, and at the top let's make it 10. For this one at the top, let's make it 30. Let's select all three again, and we set the gravity property there to be center horizontal. And then if we click only on the top one, let's just remove the text property there totally. Click on it again and make sure you go down to the hint property. Now for this one, we're going to say, please enter contact name. For the second one, we're going to ask, please enter contact email. Let's try that again. Please enter contact email. Right, and then for the last one, we're going to say, please enter contact telephone number. Right, so there's the three that we want to save, and then we can finish it off with just a normal button there. So I'm going to drag in the button there. This button, the same thing. I'm going to set a margin on the end as 30. I'll set the margin at the start as 30, and at the top, let's make this 15, even a bit more. Let's make it 20. Right, so there's my button. Click on the button, set the background there to buttons, so that we have this round one again. Go to the bottom, let's set the text color there to #1 2 3 4 5 6 Fs, and then we can just change the text on the button, and that will be create new contact. Right, and now everything is set. So we've got contact name, email, telephone number, and creating the new contact. Now on these three, let's just give them IDs quickly. So it's going to be ET name, it's going to be ET mail, it's going to be ET telephone number. Let's call it ET tel. And then for the button, we'll say BTN create contact. Right, so let's set them up in Java coding quickly. At the top, we'll have three edit texts. So I'm going to say edit text, ET name. I'll have ET mail, telephone number. I think we called it just ET tel. Right, so then also the button there, and we called it BTN create contact. Right, so there's all the components. Let's just set them up with the find view by ID. So it's going to be ET name, it will be ET mail, and it will be ET telephone number, and then also we will have BTN create contact. Now just the on-click listener there for the button, so it's going to be set on-click listener, new on-click listener, and now we are ready to do what we need to do in order to create this new contact. Right, so let's create a new contact here. So we're going to get the contact's information from ET name, ET mail, and ET telephone number. But we need to test if those values have got something in them. So I'm going to say ET name dot get text dot toString dot is empty, or if ET mail dot get text dot toString dot is empty, or the third one there, the last one, ET tel dot get text dot toString dot is empty. So if any one of those are empty, then we're going to display a toast to the user, and we're going to say, please enter all fields. Right, the else part will be, everything is fine, we can now create this new contact online. Right, so for this, we're going to create a new contact object. So we already have the contact class, which will need the name, the email, and the telephone number at least. Remember, your object ID will be created for you, created will be created for you, updated will be created for you. So the only four values that we must set is those four. It's name, email, telephone number, and then the user that is creating this contact. Right, so we're going to say contact, let's call it contact, equals new contact. And we're using the default constructor there, and then using the setter methods to set the values. So we are able to set the name by going to etName dot get text dot toString dot trim. Now that is the name. Then let's go and set the email, and that's the normal email field. That's the contact email field. So we're going to say etmail dot get text dot toString dot trim. Now let's go to the contact object again. We call the setter again. In this case, it's going to be the telephone number. and that one will be ettl.getText.toString.trim. Right, so we've set 3 of the 4 fields that we need to set. Now, in order to get that last field, and the last field is basically the user that is currently creating this contact, so that we keep this user that's logged in, keep that contact for that user separate from other users. So we can have 3 or 4 or 5 different users on the same phone, and when logging in on different accounts, we will keep their data separate. Right, so how do we do this? So first thing that I would do is to go into the contacts application, and in the contacts application I'm going to create a variable. So this is in your application class, the one that says extends application. Maybe you named it something else. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to have a public static variable, and this must be a back-endless user, and I'm going to set this just call it user. Now, where do we set this? So as soon as the user logs in, we want to make a connection to this back-endless user. So obviously right from the start, this user will be null. As soon as the guy logs into the app, this one will refer to a specific value. So how do we do that, and where do we do that? First things first is in the login activity. Well, both of them happens in the login activity. So there's 2 places where we log in the user. It's either with the user trying to authenticate himself by typing his username and his password, and then he clicks on the login button. So in this part, you will see that if we log in the user with his email and his password, and everything went fine, we get back a back-endless user. So this is then where we can go and say, go to the application class. What did we call it? I think it's contacts application. So it's going to be contacts application.user. So there's the back-endless user we just set up. And we can say, set that equal to this response, because this response is now the user that is currently logged in. So that is the user that we're working with. Also, another place where we can do exactly this line of coding is when we check whether this user is a valid login, and we log in the user automatically. So we keep him logged in. So you'll see there in this is valid login from the previous video, we check if that response is true. If it's true, it means this guy is already logged in, already authenticated. So we log him in. And in this part where we find the back-endless user by its ID, it also returns for me back this back-endless user as a response. So I'm going to use exactly that same line here. So whether the user clicks on login to log into the app, we will set that value, or if he's been taken into the app automatically because he was previously logged in, we will also get a hold of this back-endless user. So now if we go back to create contact, how do I set then this back-endless user? So I'm going to say contact.set, and if you go down, set user email. So where will I get this user's email now that's currently logged in? So I'm going to go to contacts application .user. That's the user that's currently logged in. And if you put the dot there, you'll remember that we can use this getProperty method. And by just adding as the key there, the column name, for example, the name, the column name is name, then we can get whatever data is saved into that column. But in this case, we just want to get the email of the user that's currently logged in. So we'll say contacts application.user, that gets you the back-endless user, and we get the email address. Why the email address? Because the email address will be unique for every user. Right, so now we have created this contact object. So we need a name, an email, a telephone number, and a user email. These 3 will be created for me automatically, so I don't set them. So if you go and have a look at it, we've set everything we had to set. Now what we can do is to go to this TV load again, and we can set the text to creating new user. Sorry, not new user, new contact. Please wait. And then we can start showing the progress. So I'm going to say show progress equals, or show progress true, which will start showing the progress. And now we can go into the background and actually add this new contact to back-endless. So I'm going to say back-endless dot persistence. Now we want to save something, so it's part of the persistence libraries. And if you start typing S there, you'll see there's save for Java and there's save for Android. So you can see we need to pass in an entity. An entity will be my contact object. It will be one row in my table. And then we go into the background. So I'm going to call save there, pass in the contact object, and say as the next argument new AS, which will create a new async task callback interface for me. And handle response mean now that I have created or saved this new contact online, and this is the contact or link to the contact. So this response and that contact there will be exactly the same thing. Now if we go into handle fault, then something went wrong, we can just display the toast. Let's say error plus fault.getMessage, and that displays the fault. And remember then also to stop showing the progress here. So I'm going to say show progress false to stop showing the progress. Right, so what should we do in the handle response then? So again, we can tell the user what happened. So we can say contact successfully saved or created. And then what we also want to do is to clear maybe all of these fields so the user can create another contact. So I'm going to say etmail.setText, and by just passing in null, you're clearing it. So I'm going to say et name also set the text to null, and etTel.setText and set the text to null. Right, and then also a very important part here is to stop showing your progress bar. Right, so this is creating a new contact online. So we're going to save the contact, a new contact, as the name, the email, and the telephone number. But with that, we will set the user that's currently logged in, that user's email, and then create that new contact online. So let's see if we can run this one quickly, but I think in the main activity we haven't set this up yet. So let's just go quickly to your main activities layout file. If you go to main activity, currently we only have one button that says this is the logout button. Right, so let's create a few more buttons. So what I'm going to do is to just copy this button and paste two more. So that one will be btn logout. This one will be btn create contact. And this one will be btn contact list. Let's set the text on this one as create new contact. And let's set the text on this one as contact list. Right, so if we have a look at it, it will have logout, create a new contact, and contact list. So now maybe what we can also do here is to drag in a text view on the main activity just before all the buttons. And for this text view, let's set the left margin as 30 and the start margin is 30. So sorry, not left. Let's make it end 30 and start 30. Now for this edit text, let's add the text there, logged in as, and that's what we're going to say there, logged in as whoever. Now let's go to the bottom. Let's set the style to bold. Let's set text color to the primary dark color. And maybe let's add a bit of a margin there at the top. Let's say 15. So it will say logged in as whoever. Then with the logout button already working, we need to set up these buttons. Right, so this text view, let's call it TV user. And let's go to the main activity now and set up all of these. So let's open up the main activity. I'm just going to close all of these so that we don't get confused on what we are working with. So we are busy at the main activity. On the main activity, we have this new text view and these two buttons. This one is called btn create contact, btn contact list, and then TV user. So let's set them up quickly. So I'm going to use a text view there, and I'm going to call it TV user. Now for those two buttons, we'll have btn create contact, and we'll have btn contact list. Now let's just set them up. It's going to be btn contact list. It's going to be btn create contact, and it's going to be TV user. Right, so all three set up. Let's just set up those buttons. We've got the logout button already set up. So let's say create contact.set onClick listener, new onClick listener, and for the btn contact list.set onClick listener, new onClick listener. So because we already have these activities, we have the activity to create a contact. We can just take it there with a start activity. And then with contact list, we also have it. So we can do this coding there. So I'm going to say start activity. new intent. Now to go to create contact, we are in the main activity, .this. We want to go to, in this case, it's create contact. So we need to go to the create contact activity. And that's all we need. Now let's do exactly the same thing for the contact list. So we're going to say go to, instead of create contact, we will go to contact list. Now the last thing quickly is to just set this text view. So how can we set that text view as soon as the main activity starts? So as soon as the main activity starts, we can go to TV. Well, just make sure it's after you use find view by ID, otherwise it's going to throw you an exception. So I'm going to say TV user dot set text, and the text I want to set there is logged in as, and then I want to show that user. So let's go to the application class. We call it contact application. Dot user is the user that's currently logged in, and we're going to call get email just to show the user's email. Or what we can do also is to say, let's say user dot get property, and then if you look at your users table or your columns, let me just quickly have a look at the users table will be online. So if you go to your users table at the bottom, you will see that we have a column called name. So if we look at that column there, exactly that spelling name, let's go back to Android Studio, go back to the main activity, and the property that we want there is the name. So then it's going to display the name, and then maybe we can add an opening bracket there, and we can add maybe a space also there, and then we can go back to the application class and say contacts application again, dot user dot get email, and then we put the email in brackets, space again, and close the bracket. So it could look like this. So we say logged in as, and then show the user's name, then a space, or add a space there also, then the opening bracket, user's email, and then closing the bracket. Okay, so that is how you can set that user and tell us that that is the user that is currently logged in. So let's see if this works. I'm going to run this quickly. Okay, so just before we run it, just make sure that your contact class there is deleted, or your contact table there is deleted, so that when we create a new table here, that it won't affect the one that we are sending through now. So before you run the app, just make sure that you've got no tables here. So just delete any tables that you've got there. So we create this contact table, not manually here, but in the coding. Right, so let's log into the app again. And we will say login. Right, so I am successfully logged in, and you can see there I'm logged in as Chuck Norris, that's the name, and in brackets I've got my email address. I can log out and then I'm out of the app, or I can create a new contact or go to contact list. If I go to contact list, remember contact list is just a blank activity, nothing going on there, but create new contact will take me to the one that we just created. So we're going to enter a contact name there. Let's say John Rambo. Let's enter an email address for John Rambo. So it's going to be john@rambo.co.za or .com or whatever. And then the telephone number, whatever the telephone number is. And then we can say create the new contact. Creating new contact, please wait, contact successfully saved. And now in the next video, we'll see a list of all the contacts. So if we go back now and we click on contact list, we will show a list of all the contacts there. But now what we can see online, if I refresh this, you'll see the contact table was created for me automatically. And in the contact table, we will have exactly one contact, and the contact's name is John Rambo. The email is john@rambo. So who's the user that's currently logged in? If you go back to the app, you can see at the top there's the email address, and if you scroll a bit, you can see the user email is set exactly to that email. You can see the object ID was created for you, created was created for you, and it's not yet been updated. So as soon as you change something to this value, which we'll look in another video on how to change something in the table, then your updated column will also get a value. All right, let's just see if we can also create another value into this table. So I'm going to say create a new contact again. Let's use Chuck Norris again. Contact email is chuck@norris.com, and that's his telephone number, and say create new contact. And now have a look at your table. If you refresh this again, you will see there's a second one, and that one is Chuck Norris, but it belongs to the same user email. So in the next video, when we will be extracting the data from this table, this column will play a role in which data we extract. So if we extract the data and show it in that list, we want to extract the data only for the currently logged in user. So in the next video, we'll look at extracting data from this table and placing it in a recycler view. See you in the next one.